to climate change, and that an overshoot of the 1.5 degrees will trigger irreversible damage. Law, to include the advisory opinions, tell us that it is a binding benchmark, not a bargaining chip. Morality tells us that we cannot abandon it. Every fraction of a degree beyond 1.5 multiplies injustice. Stronger storms, higher seas, deeper loss and damage. Attribution science proves that the consequences of floods, storms, droughts, heat waves, and sea level rise destroying our countries are a direct consequence of emissions, emissions that we did not create. Attribution science also provides the evidence to hold the large polluters accountable. And I say to this august body that if diplomacy fails, then we should use the courts to hold these large polluters accountable. Without the attribution science, loss and damage risk would be dismissed as charity rather than recognized as responsibility. The global finance system remains unfit for purpose. IFIs and multilateral banks are not as responsive as they ought to be. Adaptation, for example, will cost up to $387 billion annually, and loss and damage already runs in the hundreds of billions. However, the climate funding for adaptation and mitigation remains grossly inadequate, and there is little funding available to fuel the urgent transition needed. Fairness demands equitable participation in the transition, to include access to quality technologies, durable, efficient, low-carbon solutions at costs comparable to fossil fuels, protection from unfair burdens, finance at scale, that is concessional financing, primarily non-debt creating flows for renewable energy, clean transport, and resilient infrastructure. And it also requires capacity building, that is investments in people and institutions to sustain a net zero future. Colleagues, Antigua and Barbuda's National Adaptation Plan charts a clear path, and our updated NDC this year will move us closer to a green, resilient future. From survival to justice, that is our call today. Let us treat the 1.5 degree limit as a lifeline, not as a line in the sand. Let us make the polluter pays principle the foundation of a fair transition. And let us act not tomorrow, but today, so that the smallest and most vulnerable nations among us are not left to face the greatest storms alone. Finally, let us continue to fight to accelerate the transition to renewables in protecting our planet and certainly in the interests of all of humanity. I thank you.
Thank you, Antigua and Barbuda. The next speaker is His Excellency Sitiveni Liga Mama da Rabuka, Prime Minister of the Republic of Fiji.
Co-Chair, Your Excellencies, may I apologize for the very long name. It is an honor to address you today and to present the content of Fiji's third NDC. Fiji's revised NDC responds with the appropriate scale of actions and across its element demonstrates a leveling up of our vision and our commitment. Fiji has pledged to increase our energy sector emissions reduction target from 30 to 36%. Your Excellencies, our NDC is our prospectus to support access to the means of implementation, the finance and technology, and the expertise required to supplement our resources. Fiji is firmly committed to harnessing indigenous forms of energy and the phasing out of fossil fuel use. We also target to produce 100% of our electricity from renewable energy sources by 2035. Fiji's revised NDC is more than a requirement under the Paris Agreement. Realistically, the scale of our nation's goals and their achievability depend heavily on the NDCs and the actions of major global players and emitters. The ICJ advisory opinion confirmed that states have a binding obligation to act in line with science, fairness, and equity. Large polluters must take responsibility. Substantial and rapid and sustainable measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The advisory was also clear. Non-proliferation of fossil fuels should be a priority in order to keep within the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal. COP30 in Belen must be the turning point with ambitious yet feasible NDCs. I urge my fellow leaders, you ladies and gentlemen, to take courage with the political will, the resources, and relentless drive to do what is right for humanity, for a sustainable future for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Republic of Fiji. The next speaker is His Excellency Ala Karis, President of the Republic of Estonia.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Honored colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Climate change is the greatest challenge of our time. It destroys homes, livelihoods, and ecosystems while fueling instability and insecurity. COP30 in Brazil must be a turning point with strong action plans aligned with the Paris Agreement. 10 years after its adoption, we now see real progress in clean technologies, competitive industries, and opportunities for a just transition. Excellencies, Estonia is fully committed to climate neutrality by 2050 and to multilateral climate cooperation. We have already reduced emissions by 63% compared to 1990, showing our determination to meet future goals. As part of EU, our NDC for COP30 reflects this strong commitment and responsibility to secure our nature and climate. Tripling renewable energy production by 2030, as agreed during COP28 in Dubai, is the most effective way to reduce emissions. Once dependent on oil shale, Estonia now generates around 40% of its electricity from renewables, with solar capacity growing 25 times in just 5 years. By 2035, we aim for 80% clean electricity. Together with Finland and Latvia, we are building new electricity connections to support renewable energy. We will soon adopt the Climate Resilience Economy Act, aligning climate, economic, and nature policies. By law, 30% of land and sea will be protected, and the new vehicle tax is already steering drivers towards cleaner cars. Colleagues, innovation is central to our approach. Estonia develops smart rainwater system to reduce flood risks and applies digital and responsible AI tools for smart energy, precision agriculture, and climate monitoring. But we strengthen resilience and evidence-based policy making, as new technologies can also sometimes bring along environmental impacts and dependencies. The green transition must remain sustainable. Estonia shares our technical and digital expertise globally and contributes €1.5 million annually to developing countries to tackle climate change. Yet nearly 20% of the world still lacks electricity, and over 2 billion people rely on polluting cooking fuels that harm both health and the environment, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. With solar and wind now affordable, clean energy must reach everyone. Finally, Russia's war against Ukraine reminds us that conflict intensifies environmental destruction and global insecurity, with constant bombardments, poisoning ecosystems, and harming health. Climate change or climate action is therefore also a peace and security issue. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Republic of Estonia. The next speaker is His Excellency Jose Ulysses Correa e Silva, Prime Minister of Republic of Cabo Verde. You have the floor.
Thank you. Cape Verde is an African place. It's in the group of countries that produces very few carbon emissions and suffers a lot of impact of the climate change. The hurricanes that affect the U.S. were going to affect the U.S. and in the island of St. Vincent was affected. Torrential rains caused sudden floods, loss of life, displacement of families, destruction of infrastructure, and several $1 million of damage. These are increasingly frequent extreme meteorological phenomena, a warning about the urgency of strengthening resilience and protecting lives. Like other countries, we are at the forefront to be preparing our NDC 3.0, which will be issued at the end of October. Our goal is to accelerate the just transition, protect the most vulnerable people. We are going to align ambition with credibility, results, and accountability. We want to accelerate the energy transition. Our goal is to achieve more than 50% of electricity produced through renewable energy by 2030 and to get to more than 80% in 2024. It's a simple initiative, but costs money, like public lighting, 100% on LED. This reduces consumption in 30% and reduces carbon emission by 1,300 tons per year. This transition is positive on the balance sheet. It's a positive impact in terms of the energy resources and in carbon emission. The energy transition is not an ideological matter, and it's not a doctrine matter, especially regarding those that defend ecosystem questions. It has a social impact, an environmental impact, and we need adaptation centered in people and science. In terms of water, we have ecosystems, land ecosystems and maritime ecosystems. We have priorities. We have priorities to these systems. People with deficiencies along the shore or communities along the interior, we will give assistance to them. The next round of NDCs will only comply with the Paris Agreement if it is accompanied by means compatible with urgency, especially for adaptation. We have internal resources to face emergencies. So what happened in São Vicente? We have an emergency fund, a national emergency fund that mobilized more than $10 million. But it won't be enough because we will be more resilient, and more resiliency demands more investment. Thank you very much.
His Excellency Philip Edward Davis, Prime Minister of the Bahamas. You have the floor.
Your Excellencies, thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, we are at an inflection point in our planet's history. As we mark the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, we have a choice: advance ambitious climate action plans for the sake of people and our planet, or retreat, sacrificing lives, livelihoods, cultures, and biodiversity. 6 days ago, on leaving my country, we were being threatened by a hurricane called Gabriel. Thankfully, we were spared. As I stand here at this very moment, there are two systems that are threatening my country: AL3 and AL94. And each of them have been predicted to be impacting my islands. The frequency and intensity of hurricanes is real. It's no hoax. It's not a con job. The 1.5-degree Paris temperature goal is on life support, and our actions ahead of COP30 and beyond will give it the opportunity to either survive or we accept that we have come to the end of a singular call for the hope of humanity. It is clear that some of the most ambitious nationally determined contributions in the world are from developing countries, particularly small island developing states, and notably in the Caribbean region. And while small island developing states emit less than 0.01% of greenhouse gases, the ambitious climate action goals we set out in our NDCs are being proposed not only to curb emissions, but to build in adaptation, climate resilience, and sustainable development co-benefits. However, the means of implementing our NDCs are largely conditionally based on the availability of financial resources, largely from international partners. And despite limited finances, we in the Bahamas have taken the approach to be solution-oriented in the fight against climate change. In our pre-2030 NDCs, the Bahamas established a goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 30% by 2030. This goal is being driven by increasing the provision of renewable energy sources by 30% and addressing technological advancements in the transportation sector by setting a target of electric vehicles to represent 35% and hybrid vehicles representing 15% of vehicle sales by the year 2030. Our preliminary data has shown that my government's efforts via our new energy era policy, which focuses on energy efficiency, upgrades, utility-scale solar power in our nation's capital, new hybrid grids in our family of islands, and deployment of modern technology, will result in our country exceeding our 2030 renewable energy goal by 2%, with 32% renewable energy penetration across our archipelago. The Bahamas is keen to accelerate its new trajectory in the energy and transportation sectors through robust and ambitious measures for NDC 3.0. We have taken steps to support these advancements with policy and legislative measures that clearly outline the need for sustainable development, resilient infrastructure, and the provision of government-driven incentives to support private sector investments. And while these efforts are notable, our updated 2022 NDC has shown an imbalance in climate finance inflows into the Bahamas. Nearly $155 million was received between 2010 and 2020, with $140 million earmarked for mitigation actions and $50 million for adaptation. We have shown a willingness to document our priorities, outline our plans, secure partnerships, and make legislative and policy changes, but adaptation has to be better supported by international partners, and it must be balanced. We are a small country, but we punch above our weight because we know that protecting our climate will ensure a future for our islands and our people. We not only have a moral duty, but a legal imperative to address climate action as a global community. The Bahamas remain committed to the Paris Agreement, to advancing ambitious climate action plans, and submitting our NDC 3.0 ahead of COP30 in Belém. And we call on other parties to do the same. As I've said before, the time for business as usual is over. The time for bold, transformative action is now. So let us seize this moment together to save our planet and our humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Bahamas. The next speaker is His Excellency Wesley Simina, President of the Federated States of Micronesia. You have the floor.
Thank you, co-chairs, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Debating whether climate change is real or not is a distraction and a waste of precious time we do not have. For small island developing states like Micronesia, it is a crisis we live with every day. The impacts are constant. King tides, storms, droughts, saltwater intrusion, and shifting rainfall devastate our 600-plus islands, threaten our water and food security, and endanger our ancestral sites. Last year, severe droughts forced us to declare a state of emergency, showing how quickly circumstances can turn dire at the front line of this crisis. Yet, the global response lags far behind the science. While the facts are clear, why is urgent action still missing? Humanity continues to face disaster after disaster. And for small island nations like ours, the devastation is catastrophic. Micronesia has never shied away from climate leadership. We called early for a phase-down of harmful chemicals, was first to sign the PB&J Treaty, and helped lead the global methane pledge. Our new NDC and methane roadmap to be launched at COP30 renew this commitment with pathways grounded in science. But these require solidarity, for no country can meet the challenge alone. Future generations deserve a tomorrow that is healthy and resilient. We owe it to them to curb emissions, scale up ambition, and nurture leadership. Limiting fossil fuel use is not enough. The FSM continues to call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty and welcomes the invitation from Colombia to host the first international conference on the equitable phase-out of fossil fuels. To keep 1.5 alive and secure our survival, we must act now, for us today and for all generations to come. I thank you.
Thank you, Federated States of Micronesia. The next speaker. Thank you, Federated States of Micronesia. The next speaker is His Excellency Alamea Halimna, Prime Minister of the Republic of Chad. You have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, distingués délégués, Mesdames et Messieurs, je prends la parole au nom du maréchal Mohamed Idriss Déby Itno, président de la République, chef de l'État du Tchad, au nom du peuple tchadien, de ces millions de femmes, d'hommes et d'enfants confrontés à une urgence vitale, le changement climatique. Le Tchad, pays sahélien au cœur de l'Afrique, incarne aujourd'hui la réalité du changement climatique. Dans mon pays, les lacs s'assèchent, les villages se vident, les terres s'épuisent et notre jeunesse est contrainte à l'exil, non pas par choix, mais guidée par l'instinct de survie. Le lac Tchad, autrefois mer intérieure qui nourrissait nos terres et nos communautés, dont dépend la vie de 30 millions d'âmes, issus des 4 bassins des pays du bassin, a perdu en un demi-siècle plus de 90% de sa superficie. Sa disparition progressive a détruit nos écosystèmes naturels, a appauvri des millions de riverains et a contribué à alimenter les tensions et conflits autour de l'accès aux ressources naturelles. À cette épreuve climatique s'ajoute une autre menace tout aussi implacable, la menace persistante de la secte Boko Haram dans le bassin du lac Tchad, déjà appauvri par la sécheresse et frappé par les inondations, des milliers de riverains doivent fuir leur village pour échapper aux violences, subissant ainsi une double peine, celle du climat et celle du terrorisme. Face à cette double peine, le Tchad ne peut lutter seul, et pourtant, nous agissons seuls. Notre contribution déterminée au niveau national, actualisée en 2021, illustre notre engagement à réduire nos émissions de gaz à effet de serre de 19,3% d'ici 2030 par rapport au scénario de référence, tout en renforçant notre résilience climatique. Actuellement, nous sommes en train de réviser notre CDN 3.0 pour mieux nous adapter et réduire nos émissions. Mesdames et Messieurs distingués invités, vous conviendrez avec moi que la protection des populations face aux effets du changement climatique est à la fois un impératif humanitaire et une action essentielle pour assurer le développement durable de nos communautés. Dans cette perspective, le Tchad présentera à la COP30 à Belém une feuille de route articulée autour de 4 axes majeurs. 1. La mise en place d'un guichet unique pour les contextes fragiles au sein des institutions financières climatiques, dotées de procédures accélérées et de critères d'éligibilité adaptés à nos réalités. 2. Intégrer le nexus climat, paix et sécurité dans tous les mécanismes de financement, reconnaissant que les investissements climatiques contribuent à la prévention des conflits. 3. Multiplier les plateformes nationales comme instruments d'innovation pour permettre aux pays vulnérables de devenir pleinement acteurs de leur propre transformation. 4. Respecter les engagements de financement climatique en adaptant les mécanismes aux réalités des contextes fragiles. Au Tchad, nous refusons de subir. Nous continuons à agir pour la planète. En 2030, nous voulons un Tchad à la Grande Muraille verte. Ce projet panafricain, écologique et ambitieux pour protéger nos terres, où nos communautés sont préparées et alertées face aux catastrophes et où chaque enfant puisse naître et grandir dans un environnement sûr et durable. Pour atteindre cette vision, La solidarité internationale doit se traduire en actions concrètes et immédiates. Ensemble, nous pouvons faire de la COP30 un tournant historique où l'ambition climatique devient le moteur de la croissance, l'encre des alliances stratégiques et la démonstration que le multilatéralisme fonctionne quand il est soutenu par l'ambition et la mise en œuvre. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Republic of Chad. The next speaker is His Excellency James Marape, Prime Minister of the Independent State of Papua New Guinea. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Excellency Secretary General, Excellency President Lula, I know both of them are absent, but the system is registering our conversation. I want to thank them for hosting this important session. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me firstly acknowledge the leadership of the United Nations and the Secretary General for always championing the climate change action and climate justice. I thank also President Lula and Brazil for convening this timely meeting as we head towards COP30, and I reaffirm Papua New Guinea's support. As a forest and ocean nation, we stand with Brazil for COP30, and we equally offer our support for Australia's bid for COP31 so that the world recognizes the central role that forests and oceans play in climate change mitigation. Papua New Guinea is both a victim of climate change, but also equally a provider of solutions. As custodians of the world's third largest forest, tropical rainforest, I beg your pardon, and vast oceans, which are houses 7% of the world's biodiversity, we are one of planet Earth's greatest natural carbon sink. Despite our small carbon footprint, we will join Brazil at COP30 to advocate that the big polluters and high-emission industries must pay for forest and ocean nations to keep our trees standing and our corals alive. It is the forests and the oceans in their natural state that will maintain the carbon balance required for life on Earth. As at home, Papua New Guinea, we are doing our part. Through our enhanced NDC, we are scaling up renewable energies. We are also working to commit to net zero deforestation by 2030. We are also finalizing a blue national carbon policy to safeguard our mangroves, our seagrass, our coastal ecosystems, and our biodiversity. We are also reinvesting in climate-resilient infrastructure and early warning systems for our people. But ambition requires resources. For Papua New Guinea, the cost of delivering our commitment is estimated to the cost of $7.7 billion by 2030. We therefore call for scaled-up finance, technology transfer, and stronger global partnerships. We thank at this juncture the Green Climate Fund for their commitment to support and the remittance of funds to support some of the programs in Papua New Guinea. At COP30, we need to launch a public-private partnership in our view to fulfill paragraph 34 of the global stocktake that talks about reversing global deforestation by 2030. That goal will never be achieved unless we dramatically scale up finance now. We need this on the COP30 agenda, and it must be launched in Belém. In conclusion, Papua New Guinea joins Brazil and other forest nations in offering both our forests and oceans a solution to the climate crisis. Together, let us ensure a resilient, prosperous, and sustainable future for our children and generations to come. I thank you all.
Thank you, Papua New Guinea. The next speaker is His Excellency Terence Michael Drew, Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, Secretary General, let me thank you for this most important meeting. Excellency President Lula of Brazil, next President of COP30, you can count on St. Kitts and Nevis for its support. Excellencies, colleagues, friends, all. As we gather today under the shadow of rising temperatures, escalating climate disasters, and widening ambition gaps, 2 tropical storms now churn ominously in the Atlantic. For small island developing states like mine, this is a relentless reality. Just last year, our Caribbean neighbors in Grenada and St. Vincent and the Grenadines endured devastating impacts. And even as we speak, families across the region remain in a state of anxious watchfulness because in our part of the world, hurricane season doesn't just bring storms, it brings the threat of lost lives, lost livelihoods, and lost decades of development. This is a story we know too well. And yet, what is most striking is not the frequency of disaster, but the scarcity of adequate response. We are not as victims, but as defenders of humanity, as leaders of nations that have contributed the least to this crisis, but stand to lose the most. We come as stalwart advocates for climate justice and equitable development. At its core, the choice before us is one of justice. Mr. Secretary General, we hear your call, we share your sense of urgency, and through our contribution to global emissions is negligible, our commitment is undeniable. As of September 2025, the internal drafting of our National Determined Contribution 3.0 is nearly complete. We expect to launch stakeholder consultations in October of this year and to finalize and submit our updated NDC ahead of COP30 in Brazil. The updated National Greenhouse Gas Inventory, the final critical component, is also on track for completion with international support by late October. We are developing our NDC 3.0 in tandem with a comprehensive national adaptation plan, a fully integrated, inclusive, and evidence-based process supported by partners such as Climate Analytics, the NDC Partnership, and the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center through a US $2.99 million GCF Readiness Fund. Our targets are sector-specific and anchored in national development priorities. In agriculture, our Climate Smart Agriculture project is on the way. In health, we are partnering with PAHO and World Health Organization to climate-proof our healthcare infrastructure. In marine and coastal ecosystems, we are expanding marine management areas and advancing aquaculture development. In tourism, a revised sector strategy is being finalized by mid-2026. In education, climate literacy will be mainstreamed across the school system next year. In energy, geothermal energy remains our greatest hope, along with solar energy and wind energy. We mean business. Our governance framework is being transformed to reflect the full spectrum of climate ambition, from mitigation to adaptation to loss and damage. Colleagues, Excellencies, we urge our partners in the global north to act as well, to act with urgency. Let this gathering, therefore, be remembered as a turning point and a moment when the world finally did what it had to do, what it had promised, which is to stand up for those who have long stood on the front line of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, St. Kitts and Nevis. The next speaker is His Excellency Kashim Shettima, Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. You have the floor.
Your Excellency. President of the General Assembly, Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a profound honor to address this pivotal dialogue on climate change at a moment when our planet stands at a crossroads. The climate emergency demands not just words, but courageous and sustained leadership. For Nigeria, a country acutely vulnerable to climate impacts, climate action is not a choice. It is an existential necessity. Mr. President, To mobilize resources, we have undertaken significant domestic reforms. We have simplified and modernized our tax laws to ease compliance, removed unproductive fossil fuel subsidies, reduced burdens on households and businesses, and enhanced revenue efficiency. At the same time, we are strengthening our business environment through legislation and policies that improve the ease of doing business, to attract private capital and expand opportunities for investment in clean energy and sustainable infrastructure. In March 2025, we launched the Nigeria Carbon Market Activation Policy, which establishes a robust framework for high-integrity emissions reductions while positioning Nigeria as a credible hub for Article 6 voluntary and compliance carbon markets. Through this mechanism, our target is to mobilize up to $2.2 billion by 2030 in high-quality credits and related investments. Mr. President, we are under no illusion. No country can tackle the climate crisis alone. Like other developing nations, Nigeria requires significant support to implement effective mitigation and adaptation strategies. We therefore call on international financial institutions, notably the World Bank, IMF, and African Development Bank, to scale up financing for climate action. Likewise, developed countries must honor their climate finance commitments, including the $100 billion annually pledged under the Paris Agreement. As a demonstration of our unwavering commitment, Nigeria has updated its nationally determined contributions, NDC 3.0, in line with UNFCCC guidance. This enhanced NDC reflects greater ambition, integrating mitigation and adaptation measures to safeguard our people, protect ecosystems, and accelerate inclusive growth. It was formally submitted to the UNFCCC Secretariat on September 21st. This NDC 3.0 departs from the business-as-usual approach to an absolute economy-wide emission reduction, our highest ambition level to date. The targets are better defined and will be supported by an investment plan to accelerate its implementation. Nigeria's NDC 3.0 commits to significantly increasing mitigation and adaptation ambitions with clearer target compared to NDC 2.0. Within the LULUCF sector, Nigeria aims to lower the deforestation rate by 60%, which offers a substantial mitigation potential of 304.8 metric CO2 equivalent, while also pursuing a mitigation potential of 34.4 MT CO2 equivalent by increasing forest area through reforestation and afforestation. Increasingly, adaptation, the adoption and use of cleaner energy systems, especially in manufacturing and industries. We are increasing captive generation capacity using cleaner fuels by installing 7 GW, 50% renewable and 50% natural gas for a practical energy mix plan on our journey to net zero by 2060. Electrifying key sectors such as public transport, industry, and others while implementing national energy efficiency standards to deliver absolute reductions in energy intensity by 2030. 5, advancing decarbonization pathways for oil and gas, mining, cement, and other heavy industries with transparent annual reporting and accountability mechanisms. And 6, for the first time, health and action for climate empowerment have been included as priority sectors in our NDC 3.0, demonstrating our commitment to an economy-wide climate governance. On adaptation and resilience, we are scaling climate-smart agriculture to reach 5 million smallholder farms by 2030, increasing yields by 20 to 30%, and expanding drought-resistant crops. We are building resilient infrastructure, integrating early warning systems, climate-informed urban planning, and resilient housing to reduce climate-related damages by 50%. We plan to restore mangroves, forests, and wetlands to enhance carbon sinks by 200 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, cumulatively by 2030, while protecting biodiversity and livelihoods. Nigeria aims to lower the deforestation rate by 60%. And to deliver on these commitments, Nigeria is mobilizing $20 to $25 billion in climate finance by 2030, including green bonds, blended finance, and public-private risk-sharing mechanisms. We aim to unlock at least $7 to $10 billion in grants and concessional finance from global partners, while promoting technology transfer, regional energy integration, and green entrepreneurship to drive inclusive growth. Institutionally, Nigeria has established the National Council on Climate Change, supported by a cross-ministerial secretariat to ensure coherence, accountability, and measurable results. We have adopted a transparent monitoring, reporting, and verification system aligned with global best practices to track progress annually. Already, solar mini-grids power over 150 rural communities, while nature-based solutions have reduced flood damage by over 40% in coastal areas, improved fisheries, and sequestered carbon. Mr. President, finally, Nigeria's climate action is anchored on social equity. Women, youth, persons with disabilities, indigenous peoples, and vulnerable communities are at the heart of our transition. Social protection, reskilling, and just transition programs are in place to ensure that no one is left behind. We therefore call on global partners to scale up concessional finance, knowledge sharing, and technology transfer to accelerate not just Nigeria's transition, but Africa's contribution to a safer, more sustainable world. In closing, Mr. President, let me reaffirm. For Nigeria, climate action is not a trade-off between growth and sustainability. It is the pathway to sustainable growth, innovation, security, and shared prosperity. We stand ready to work with all partners to lead where necessary and to deliver, because the time for climate action is now. I thank you for your audience.
Thank you, Nigeria. We now move on to interventions from ministers, and interventions are limited to 2 minutes. The next speaker is His Excellency Dion George, Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. You have the floor.
Excellencies, colleagues, every country on this planet has a responsibility to act to prevent the further warming of our planet and the devastation caused by climate change. South Africa is determined to play its part, informed by the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capability. In line with the Paris Agreement, guided by its national circumstances, South Africa will strengthen its commitment to the multilateral climate process. South Africa is currently completing its second nationally determined contribution document for the period of implementation from 2031 to 2035. In determining its NDC, South Africa has demonstrated ambition. It has also identified 8 adaptation goals that are related to the Sustainable Development Goals. The aim is to enhance the resilience of local communities against climate impacts. The draft NDC document further presents and positions the importance of having to plan for loss and damage, impacts and associated escalating costs. It presents a case for increased access to financial support, including technology transfer and capacity building. On just transition, the draft NDC document prioritizes a fair, just and equitable transition that enables social inclusion. South Africa submitted its first biennial transparency report in December 2024 and remains committed to report and account on progress made in line with Paris Agreement requirements. To make this progress meaningful, it is essential that all countries honour their commitments to reduce emissions and ensure sufficient support to countries that are most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. The next speaker is His Excellency Ruslan Adalgeriev, Aide to the President and Special Representative on Climate of the Russian Federation. You have the floor.
Уважаемый господин председатель, уважаемые коллеги, Российская Федерация ответственно подходит к деятельности на климатическом направлении, считаем КИКОН и Парижское соглашение надежной основой для долгосрочного климатического урегулирования. Сегодня я имею честь сообщить, что Россия представляет свой последовательный, более амбициозный АНУФ. К 1935 году мы намерены сократить выбросы парниковых газов на 65-67% относительно 1990 года. В очередной раз подтверждаем серьезность своих намерений по достижению углеродной нейтральности не позднее 60-го года. Подчеркну, что Россия перешла от стратегии к практической реализации, создав надежную национальную архитектуру для декарбонизации с учетом приоритета активной цифровизации, электрификации, создания новых высокотехнологических отраслей и высокопроизводительных рабочих мест. Во-первых, мы тестируем самые передовые инструменты в Сахалинской области. Был запущен региональный эксперимент по квотированию выбросов для крупнейших эмитентов. В результате регион достиг углеродной нейтральности раньше установленного срока. Этот успех доказывает эффективность выбранного подхода и послужит моделью для будущего масштабирования углеродного регулирования. Во-вторых, мы создали прозрачную работающую инфраструктуру для вовлечения частного сектора в деятельность по сокращению выбросов парниковых газов и повышению их поглощению. Сформирован реестр углеродных единиц, утверждены национальные стандарты в сфере климата, также имплементированы международные стандарты ИСО, функционирует институт аккредитации органов валидации и верификации парниковых газов. Это создает предсказуемую среду для реализации климатических проектов бизнесом. Россия представляет свой АНУ в условиях беспрецедентного санкционного давления. Против нашей страны введены колоссальное количество незаконных технологических, торговых, экономических и финансовых рестрикций. В первую очередь это касается отраслей с наибольшими эмиссиями парниковых газов, что серьезно ограничивает доступ к необходимым ресурсам и технологиям. Несмотря на односторонние действия, Россия продолжает движение к реализации Парижского соглашения. При этом вынужден отметить, что климатический переговорный процесс переживает кризис. Убеждены, что в сложившейся ситуации Организация Объединенных Наций может сыграть важную роль, уравновешивая интересы разных групп стран. Хочу подчеркнуть, что это возможно сделать только выступая с непредвзятой позицией. Дальнейшее развитие процесса зависит от нахождения баланса при выполнении всего комплекса мер, который может быть полноценно реализован в случае соблюдения ряда условий, включающих обеспечение принципа технологической нейтральности, в том числе от проектов в низкоуглеродной атомной и гидроэнергетике. Наличие недискриминационных условий для реализации климатических проектов и безбарьерный доступ к международной верификационной инфраструктуре, а также эффективное развитие международного сотрудничества. Российская Федерация в настоящий момент сталкивается с барьерами и внешнеэкономическими ограничениями, в том числе по доступу к зарубежному оборудованию, технологиям, услугам, рынкам капитала и углеродных единиц, что противоречит духу Парижского соглашения. Надеюсь, что все осознают безальтернативность такого подхода и будут готовы к продуктивной работе на предстоящей 30-й сессии конференции сторон в Вилене. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you, Russian Federation. The next speaker is Her Excellency Batsetseg Batmanka, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mongolia. You have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Mongolia is among the climate vulnerable nations. We face intensifying droughts, harsh winters, water scarcity, land degradation, and the erosion of biodiversity. These are not distant warnings, they are lived realities for our herders, our farmers, and our children. But we do not come to this summit with despair. We come with determination and solutions. In 2016, Mongolia ratified the Paris Agreement and pledged to be part of the global solution. And today, we reaffirm and elevate that commitment. By 2035, we aim to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by over 30%, and with nature and innovation as our allies, we can push that reduction to more than 50%. Our strategy is bold and comprehensive. We are determined to transform our energy sector with renewables and efficiency, modernize transport, shifting coal from roads to rails, and embracing electric mobility. recycle waste and maximize resource efficiency, and restore our greatest asset to our rangelands. Mongolia's 110 million hectares of rangeland are not just grasslands, they are carbon sinks, biodiversity havens, and cultural treasures. Though over 70% are degraded, more than 80% retain the natural ability to regenerate. This is our opportunity to lead with nature-based solutions. Hence, we are aiming to make the 17th conference of the parties to the UN Convention to Combat Desertification to be hosted in 2026 in Mongolia, more than a conference, but a turning point. One of our flagship initiatives, the Rangeland Flagship Initiative, will unite knowledge, investment, and technology, including AI-powered monitoring, to unlock the full carbon sequestration potential to our landscapes. Let Mongolia be a bridge between tradition and innovation, between region and solutions. Let our nomadic heritage guide a global movement toward regeneration, resilience, and respect for the earth. I thank you.
Thank you, Mongolia. The next speaker is Her Excellency Alicia Bassena Ibarra, Minister of the Environment and Natural Resources of the United Mexican States. You have the floor.
Thank you. En nombre de la presidenta Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo, México atiende este insoslayable llamado convocado por el secretario general Antonio Guterres junto con Brasil, representado por André Correa del Lago. La presidenta Sheinbaum ha encabezado un cambio estructural a través del Plan México, que consiste en una estrategia de industrialización de largo plazo. Se trata de un plan que intenta aumentar la inversión pública y privada por encima de 28% del PIB, crear 1.5 millones de empleo, incrementar el contenido nacional, sustituir importaciones, promover mayor integración regional y acelerar la transición energética, implementando además una economía circular que reduzca al menos un 50% de los residuos sólidos. Uno de los sectores que más emisiones genera en México es el transporte terrestre, genera alrededor del 25% del total. Por ello, el Plan México propone, por ejemplo, la construcción de 3,000 kilómetros de trenes eléctricos que conectarían al país de sur a norte. Nuestro compromiso en la NDC 2 es disminuir 35% de los gases de efecto invernadero para 2030, lo que implica reducir alrededor de 225 millones de toneladas de carbono aproximadamente. Esto esperamos lograrlo combinando medidas como ya mencionada en los trenes ferroviarios, los trenes eléctricos, así como en la reducción de emisiones a partir de la transición del uso de combustóleo a gas natural en las termoeléctricas del país. Para la NDC 3 estamos en un proceso de consulta interna con todos los sectores industriales de la construcción, el acero, la minería, con energía, nuestra empresa nacional de petróleo, Pemex, de electricidad, CFE, y con el sector agropecuario para que nuestros compromisos sean realistas y factibles para 2035. Pero en principio el compromiso que queremos lograr es reducir alrededor de 175 toneladas de carbono equivalente. Alcanzar este objetivo es imposible sin una sólida estrategia de protección de la biodiversidad y de soluciones basadas en la naturaleza. Tan solo en 2024 nuestro país en los ecosistemas absorbieron 208 millones de toneladas de dióxido de carbono equivalente. En esta materia, nosotros estamos implementando un plan de restauración nacional que incluye la reforestación de 220,000 hectáreas de bosques, selvas y manglares. Necesitamos una taxonomía, como lo mencionó el presidente de Francia, que nos permita contabilizar la absorción de carbono por hectárea de cada tipo de ecosistema. Estimamos, por ejemplo, que los manglares son 4 veces más eficientes en absorber carbono que otros ecosistemas. Nuestro compromiso al 2030 es proteger el 30% de nuestro territorio, tanto marino como terrestre. Contamos ya con 232 áreas naturales protegidas que suman 99 millones de hectáreas. Debemos llegar a 155 millones de hectáreas. Estamos convencidos de que la acción climática es más efectiva cuando se construye desde el territorio y de la mano de las comunidades, de las mujeres y de los pueblos indígenas. Para México y para el sur global, el financiamiento con base en el principio de responsabilidades comunes pero diferenciadas y la adaptación no es opcional, es una urgencia. Sabemos que la crisis climática golpea con más fuerza a quienes menos tienen y por eso nuestros esfuerzos de mitigación y adaptación estamos considerando también el tema de pérdidas y daños en nuestra nueva NDC. Creemos que no puede haber justicia climática sin justicia social, sin igualdad. Reiteramos entonces el irrestricto respaldo de mi país, México, a Brasil y a las Naciones Unidas, esta organización, el multilateralismo y la lucha que encabeza el secretario general contra el cambio climático. Por eso, hagamos de la COP30 un verdadero muchirao, que quiere decir acción colectiva, conjunta, solidaria, y transformemos esta crisis climática en una oportunidad histórica. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Mexico. We now invite His Excellency Andreas Eriksen, Minister of Climate and Environment of Norway. Please, you have the floor.
Dear friends, this year marks yet another milestone in our collective response to the urgency of climate change. The Paris Agreement is driving emissions down, and this year's climate targets must be another step towards keeping 1.5 within reach, recognizing that every fraction of a degree matters. I am honored to present Norway's second NDC under the Paris Agreement. Our 1.5 aligned NDC is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 70 to 75% compared to 1990 levels by 2035. The policies to implement our NDC include strong and ambitious measures to support timelines for phasing out the use of fossil fuels towards 2050 in key sectors. This provides strong long-term signals and predictability for our pathway to a low-emission society. Friends, as one of Europe's major energy providers in both oil and gas and renewables, we see the need to phase out emissions from both production and consumption of energy. Our goal is to gradually change our economy, creating jobs and opportunities in low-emission sectors. The success of such strategies will require coordinated approaches between countries producing and consuming energy, like the binding climate agreement between Norway and the EU. While celebrating 10 years of delivery under the Paris Agreement, COP30 must send clear signals to the world that we stand ready together to do more. In Belém, we welcome stronger collaboration between all countries going forward to achieve our common goals of rapidly reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We now have the pleasure to invite His Excellency Mukhtar Babayev, President and the representative of the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan for climate issues. Please, you have the floor, Excellency.
Excellencies, dear friends, dear colleagues, as the COP29 presidency, we want to thank all colleagues who have submitted their NDCs. These plans are essential. They help us maintain momentum in the multilateral process. Their targets, timelines, and priorities will send strong market signals that give a green light to green investment. And their vision of sustainable development, job creation, clean energy, and other social benefits can help us build popular system support for ambitious action. Overall, these reports matter. They should be robust, not rushed. And they should then be delivered, not discarded. But every plan has a price tag. And from earliest days of multilateral negotiations, we have agreed on the need to support each other. In Baku at COP29, we made historic progress on how we would cooperate and enable action. From the Baku finance goal to carbon markets and the fund for responding to loss and damage, countries pledged trillions of dollars for climate action. But a promise made must be a promise kept. There were collective agreements. Collectively, we must be delivered. We will not forget them, and we will not accept going backwards. We will keep asking, where is adaptation finance that was promised by this year? Where is the money for the UN climate funds that was promised by 2030? Dear colleagues, the integrity of international process depends on delivery. The credibility of nations depends on them honoring their words. We need to cut emissions, not aid budgets, because we know that international support will allow for enhanced ambition in our climate plans, and that will benefit everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, His Excellency. Now we invite to the floor His Excellency Rafael Lucia, Secretary of Environment and Natural Resources of the Philippines. Please, you have the floor.
Excellencies, the Philippines is preparing its third nationally determined contribution looking to 2035. This will not be our first submission, but it will be our strongest yet. We are guided by a sobering global outlook. Even if all unconditional NDCs are met, global emissions will decline by only 3% by 2030 from 2019 levels, far short of the trajectory required to keep 1.5 degrees centigrade within reach. This tells us that the real test is not ambition on paper, but delivery of results. This recognition has shaped our NDC 3.0. Our objective is stronger delivery, not only higher targets. Drawing lessons from our previous NDC, we have designed our enhanced NDC not as a headline figure, but as a costed, economy-wide investment plan. It is anchored in greenhouse gas inventories, climate expenditure tracking, and a national implementation framework. It treats forestry and land use as carbon sinks and as market assets. It employs Article 6 and other mechanisms to mobilize finance and sustainable growth, and it integrates just transition, nature-based solutions, circular economy, gender equality, and social inclusion. Excellencies, what will define progress in the years ahead is not what was pledged, but what was delivered. Therefore, the credibility of NDCs must rest on implementation backed by finance, technology, and capacity building for developing countries. On this basis, the Philippines calls for NDCs to be recognized as credible investment frameworks, costed, transparent, and backed by predictable grant finance for mitigation with adaptation co-benefits, supported by monitoring and accountability that measure both ambition and delivery. Thank you, and we wish all of us success.
Thank you, His Excellency. We now invite His Excellency Honorable Sharif Ali Sharif, Minister for Labor, Economy and Investment, United Republic of Tanzania. Please, Minister, you have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I bring greetings from the United Republic of Tanzania and from Her Excellency our beloved President, Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan. Excellencies, the climate crisis is reshaping lives, economies, and geographies. Tanzania has already lost over 90% of the ice cap of Mount Kilimanjaro, while Zanzibar, our beautiful island in Tanzania, with more than 30% of its land below 5 meters above sea levels, faces double threat of sea level rise and saltwater intrusion. Excellencies, Tanzania is acting with ambition. Through our NDC 2.0, we pledge 30 to 35% emissions reduction by 2030, conditional on international support of $19.2 million. However, assessment of the implementation of our NDC 2.0 revealed a $12 billion financing gap, highlighting the urgent need for the international community to honor their obligations under the conventions and the Paris Agreement. We are finalizing NDC 3.0, guided by our new Tanzania Development Vision 2050, which places climate resilience, environmental integrity, and sustainable growth at the center. Excellencies, through the leadership of our President, Samia Suluhu Hassan, Tanzania has launched the National Clean Cooking Strategy 2024-2034, aiming for 80% adoption of clean cooking solution by 2034. We welcome $2 billion pledged globally for clean cooking and call for quick disbursement and scaling up to match the urgent needs of African households, and access to technological development and transfer to accelerate adaptation, mitigation, and innovation. Your Excellencies, for Africa, adaptation and poverty alleviation remain the highest priorities. We are also ready to offer solutions, but to succeed, the international community must urgently fulfill their pledges, not in words, but in grant-based financial support for access, such as clean cooking, energy success, the blue economy, and resilience. In conclusion, Tanzania stands ready with ambition, commitment, and solutions. We are ready to join the international community to act with urgency, fairness, and solidarity for our people and for our planet. Thank you very much. Asanteni sana.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We now invite His Excellency Adlur Graman Khan, Advisor for Ministry of Industries of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. Please, you have the floor.
Co-chairs and Excellencies, Assalamu alaikum. Bangladesh has always stood at the front line of the climate crisis, yet we remain steadfast at our commitment to solutions. In our third NDC, we pledge to reduce 84.97 million tons of CO equivalent emissions by 2035, a 20.3% reduction from business as usual. Despite our limited resources, we cut 26.74 million tons unconditionally, demonstrating our resolve to act, but to deliver the remaining 58.23 million tons. We call upon the global community to honor its pledges of finance, technology, and capacity support. With full implementation of our NDCs, Bangladesh will peak its emissions by 2030 and then begin to decline, a clear sign that climate justice can be advanced when ambition is matched with support. To strengthen the alignment of climate finance with our national priorities, Bangladesh has launched the Bangladesh Climate and Development Partnership, the BCDP. This will coordinate climate finance, ensure climate policy coherence, and enhance cooperation to accelerate the implementation of our adaptation needs and our mitigation targets. Our government is leading this initiative highest levels, involving multiple ministries as well as having development and financing partners. We look forward to making the BCDP more inclusive by adding private sector and CSOs and more development partners on board. We would like to deliver real benefits for our people. This is not just about funding projects. It is about building trust and building solidarity with our international partners so that together we can deliver climate action that truly makes a difference, especially for our vulnerable populations. We urge the world, especially the developed countries, to match this ambition with fairness and solidarity, to stand with vulnerable nations so that no country is left behind in the fight for our planet's survival, so that together we can build a safer, more just and sustainable future for all. I thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We now invite His Excellency David Lammy, Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Please, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellencies. Thank you for convening us at this critical time when climate change is demonstrably not a distant threat or tomorrow's problem. It is an emergency, one that we must address with urgency. The extreme heat, floods, wildfires, droughts throughout the world, all disrupting lives, livelihoods, and economies everywhere. And let's be honest, the people paying the price, the hardest and deepest of prices, are those who contributed the least to this crisis, the most vulnerable in the most volatile places. And we must address this. And the United Kingdom is absolutely dedicated to playing its part. At COP29 last November, our Prime Minister announced the UK's commitment, our nationally determined contribution to fighting climate change under the Paris Agreement. It will cut our greenhouse gas emissions by at least 81% by 2035, compared to 1990 levels. It is economy-wide, covering every single sector, aligned with the goal of keeping global warming at 1.5%. National determined contributions matter because they send a signal to our citizens, to investors, and to the world that we are ambitious and determined to deliver on climate change. And let me be clear, ambition is not a drag on growth, as some would suggest. It drives growth. The UK is the first major economy to halve its emissions whilst also growing its economy by almost 80%. Last year, our green economy grew 3 times faster than the economy as a whole. This is the growth story of the coming decade, and ambitious NDCs are the foundation to attracting the investment that makes it possible. But none of us can succeed alone. Multilateralism is the key to achieving our ambitions. Before Paris, we were on track for 4 degrees of warming by the end of this century. Now, if we each deliver our 2030 NDC commitments, we're on track for 2.6 degrees Celsius. If we also all fulfill our net zero commitments, it could be 1.9 degrees Celsius. Progress is real, but it's not enough. Our current pledges must be the floor